Hello. Before I get too far into this talk, I want to take a moment to acknowledge our state, territorial, and local epidemiologists, environmental health practitioners, and microbiologists. They're on the front line investigating outbreaks and then reporting their findings to us here at CDC. I also want to thank our CDC collaborators and our EPA collaborators. Okay, so I'll be talking about data on 2009 to 2017 untreated recreational water-associated outbreaks. Such outbreaks are defined as similar illness in two or more people, and these people are going to be linked by location and time of exposure, and they're going to be exposed to untreated recreational water, so that's water in lakes, rivers, ponds, streams, and the like, or the air surrounding untreated recreational water. So the data on outbreaks comes to CDC via the National Outbreak Reporting System, or NORS. The 50 states, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories report these data voluntarily to CDC. The data in this presentation were reported to CDC by August 14th, 2020. Okay, so the big overall view is that 30 states reported 98 outbreaks associated with untreated recreational water for the years 2009 to 2017. These outbreaks resulted in at least 4,542 cases, 80 hospitalizations, and 0 deaths. So this bar graph here depicts the number of untreated recreational water associated outbreaks, the total 98 again, and it depicts them by month of earliest illness onset date. So as you would expect, most of these outbreaks occurred in June, July, August. Actually, 82 of these outbreaks occurred then. So 84% of the outbreaks occurred in that 3-month period or started in that 3-month period. And you would expect that because that's when we're swimming in untreated recreational water. In contrast, you see 0 outbreaks reported for January, February, November, and December. And unless you're a polar bear, you wouldn't expect swimming in untreated recreational water during those months in most of the United States. This pie chart here depicts the number of untreated recreational water associated outbreaks by etiology. The darkest piece of the pie, or almost 2/3 of the pie, is taken up by outbreaks caused by enteric pathogens. The next darkest pie depicts 8 outbreaks, or 8% of the outbreaks, and the lightest slice of the pie depicts 26 outbreaks, or 27% of the outbreaks, where there is no identified etiology. It might just totally not be known, or the etiology suspected. It lacks laboratory confirmation, as you would have with the other 2 pie pieces. Okay, if we look into more detail among the enteric pathogen outbreaks, we see that norovirus, Shiga toxin, cryptosporidium, and Shigella are the big players, the big etiologies of these outbreaks. This is in stark contrast to what we see with outbreaks associated with treated recreational water, outbreaks associated with pools. If we were looking at this pie chart for treated recreational water associated outbreaks, we would see that half the pie chart would be taken up by cryptosporidium alone. Cryptosporidium is a extremely chlorine tolerant parasite, and that's our main barrier to the transmission of pathogens in pools, hot tubs, water playgrounds, chlorine. If it's resistant to chlorine, it's going to spread. When we're looking at untreated recreational water, we see a more diverse array of etiologies. When we focus on the outbreaks with the other confirmed etiologies, we see the big players are cyanotoxin, avian schistosomes, and then to some extent adenovirus and leptospira. So last year, the CDC's Healthy Swimming Program put out a report on untreated recreational water venues, and we focused on 3 outbreaks. One of those outbreaks was in Minnesota. It occurred in 2019, and it was an outbreak of S-tech infections associated with a public lake. The Minnesota Department of Health identified a total of 69 cases. 4 of them were laboratory confirmed infections with closely related isolates. And by that I mean the isolates were within 0 to 2 single nucleotide polymorphisms by whole genome sequencing. And another thing to note is that 24 or 34% of the ill persons reported visiting only once to the lake. So you had some idea of when they were possibly infected, and their exposure dates range from July 16th to August 11th. The health department identified the following risk factors: swallowing lake water with an odds ratio of 3.8, and age less than or equal to 10 years with an odds ratio of 2.9. We also found that about 80% of the cases in this outbreak were in females. So it could well be that moms or the female caregivers were bringing the children to the lake and getting into the water with them. In terms of the environmental investigation in this outbreak, it found that no monitoring test results exceeded recreational water criteria of the state of Minnesota, which are similar to those of EPA. So through April through October, all the water monitoring testing, which was done weekly, was within acceptable limits. And when the environmental health practitioners went out, they found no evidence of point source of fecal they found no evidence of point source fecal contamination. So basically what happened is they looked for septic tanks, they looked for farms upstream, they did all this and they couldn't find any sources of fecal contamination. But the epidemiologist did find that about 15 visitors and 4 lifeguards reported entering the lake while ill. So there could have been something going on more locally in this beach. But it is not uncommon for these untreated recreational water outbreaks, the investigation of these outbreaks, not to find the source. That's a theme that comes up multiple times. I will say when this lake was shut down and closed to swimmers, and then reopened a few weeks later, there were no additional cases. And that's something we struggle with the CDC is when do we reopen something that's been shut down? Okay, in terms of limitations, overall, we underestimate the number of recreational water associated outbreaks that occur compared to what's actually occurring. This is related to the fact that the capacity and requirements of different jurisdictions limits to some extent sometimes the ability to detect, investigate, and report cases, therefore make links between cases and identify outbreaks. And also, not all jurisdictions ask about exposure to recreational water. So if we're not asking about the exposure, it's harder to make the links and harder to identify outbreaks. And this is a big issue with investigations of cases of illness caused by enteric pathogens. Specific to untreated recreational water venues, and underestimating how many are occurring, we're up against people traveling 100 miles or more to swim in lakes, rivers, and oceans. That means they might go back to multiple public health jurisdictions. It's going to be harder to connect cases and therefore pick up outbreaks. And the other issue is response activities. Sometimes there are issues within a jurisdiction between the public health agency and the natural resources agency, and other times there's issues among jurisdictions. So if a lake is in multiple jurisdictions, one jurisdiction might want to respond differently than the other. In terms of future challenges on the treated recreational water side, we're seeing pools built that mimic our natural bodies of water, our untreated recreational water venues. And so we now have these hybrid venues such as artificial swimming lagoons, surf venues, and natural swimming pools. The artificial swimming lagoons have a swim area where the water is chlorinated, but then they also have areas designated for other uses such as kayaking. So much like a lake or lagoon. Our surf venues are very far inland in some cases, and we're talking about millions of gallons of water, and we're talking about equipment generating waves much like you see in the ocean. We've seen one of these venues already associated with a case of primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, which is basically what we see with untreated recreational water. And then with the natural swimming pools, we're trying to filter the water with plants. So us pool experts are going to have to come to you all, our untreated recreational water experts, to see how we can deal with these quote unquote pools or hybrid venues. But I think the real take home message is CDC's Healthy Swimming Program needs to expand its prevention efforts with untreated recreational water. We focus on so much more on treated recreational water venues or pools, hot tubs, and spas. And we've had to do that because that's where we see most of our outbreaks. While we saw 98 outbreaks for 2009 to 2017 associated with untreated recreational water, at the same time, we saw 334 associated with treated recreational water. So that's it for me. Here are some of our prevention messages we've developed in the past year for untreated recreational water and a bolded link to this information. The link below that is CDC's guidance on preventing COVID at public beaches. Thank you.